Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. I'm here with Doctors Connell and David. We're talking about their new book, Override. And what I love most about this book is it's going to help you figure out, are you a sword or are you a shield? What does that mean? Well, you got to tune in to figure it out. But once you do, the rest of your life is going to become much more simple. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Everforward Radio. I'm your host, Chase Tuning, and today I've got not only one, but two great guests to be diving into really what makes us unique from the inside out, our biology, our biochemistry, the neuroscience, so that we can better understand what makes us tick, how we tick, and why, so that we're not always struggling and applying certain behaviors to life towards our personal development goals, wellness goals, lifetime goals, whatever that might look like. The more you can understand yourself, you can finally, maybe we'll find out, take back the wheel of your life, of your body. So with that, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Override is the book. Discover your brain type, why you do what you do, and how to do it better. And first and foremost, I would love to kind of lay the groundwork a little bit, get some definitions defined, get some terms defined, and help the listener, the viewer, really just kind of grab hold of the core concept of the book. I highly recommend the book, by the way, because not only is there a lot of scientific explanation, there are a lot of anecdotal, sharing stories and experiences with patients and people that, you are taking the science and applying it to and getting real world feedback to. But there's some unique quizzes in there as well. And I'll just spoil it right away. I'll say I'm definitely a sword, but I feel like I sometimes have shield tendencies, but we'll dissect that more. At its core, my takeaway first and foremost was we're really talking about an unconscious addiction to comfort. And that is where, we're going to be defending ourselves, coiling in, or we're going to be poking and probing and seeking out kind of thing. Would you say, is that a fair statement, kind of this through line, this unconscious addiction to comfort we all have in then ultimately deciding to figure out our bodies?
I think that's a very nice, succinct way to put that together.
I think I'm paraphrasing your work, so it's your words, I'm pretty sure.
But it also comes from the comfort comes from something very unique. So we are all comforted in different ways, and it's understanding where that comes from. And we went at this from the neurochemistry, from brain chemistry, that shows how we sort out into two basic types of neurochemical imbalances. And these are more deficiency syndromes than having too much. And it involves a stimulating side of the brain chemistry, which is the dopamine side, and a calming side, which is the serotonin imbalance. And we all are hybrids. You mentioned that you've got a little bit of a shield in you.
A little bit, yeah.
We identified the stimulating dopamine side as the swords. They're out there looking for stimulation, and the shields are the serotonin deficient, and they're more calming. And these two brain types, these two brain chemicals, play out not just in human beings and throughout our evolution, but in other animal species, as we discuss in the book.
Go ahead.
Well, I just to kind of open that aperture a little bit. The abstract of why we're, I think, addicted to comfort is because we conflate comfort with stability, balance, homeostasis. I mean, the body wants to remain in homeostasis. If you put it in an exercise modality, your heart rate's going to go up, your blood pressure is going to increase, you're going to breathe faster. Your body wants to accommodate that, and then when you stop that exercise, your body, resets to a balance. And so balance is the way I think we unconsciously want to feel, and we kind of diagnose balance for comfort. I mean, when we feel comfortable, we feel like we're in balance. Well, sometimes comfort is doing something that's impulsive and stupid and it's self-destructive, or sometimes comfort is in avoiding a a difficult situation. You feel
which arguably is not balanced, right?
Is
there.
not balanced, right? So it's the addiction to comfort is self-defeating in many ways.
Which is interesting because, to Con's point, if you're doing something stupid and risk-taking, and which we
never do, right?
not your balance, but it's actually
Particularly swords.
it's a mechanism to reach equilibrium, because we're doing those things. The swords are doing these behaviors because they're looking for this kind of stimulation to put in a little more dopamine into their brain chemistry, which is, you take a kid that's hyperactive, ADDs, in a classroom, he's running around making everybody nervous and not focused. Why would you give that kid a stimulant to get him back to balance? Because you're giving him, in these stimulants, they have dopamine. That's what these stimulant medicines are. They're dopamine. So you're rebalancing them and they're seeking their comfort by behaving that way. They behave that way because they're low in dopamine. So
I do want to get into, we've already kind of said some key terms here, sword, shield. But before I do, Connell, since you brought it up, I had it down, this concept kind of towards the end of the book really stuck out to me, that I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. But, homeostasis, you all say that it's really more of a concept than a constant. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's what the body wants to maintain. The body prefers to be in equilibrium, and there are different things that cause disequilibrium. I mean, like what I was saying before, exercise causes disequilibrium. If you go outside and it's 32 degrees, you're going to want to put on a jacket because your body wants to be warmer.
So would you say any kind of internal or external stressor disrupts homeostasis?
It does. Yeah. So we're always trying to compensate for that disequilibrium. In many, I mean, look, most of the time the body works beautifully. I mean, it does that. We tend
when we
to put
leave it alone,
we just automatically put on a jacket when we're cold, or the body perspires when it's hot. Where it gets into trouble is, I think, emotionally, because those things that are comfort driven can also be self-destructive.
And the world around us is in flux, so we're not operating in a vacuum. So
life is definitely not a constant, that's for sure.
No, so homeostasis is a concept, but if there's 3 people in this room, we're already interfering with our homeostasis. And as Con said, that comes out emotionally. We have to react to that. Physically, we have to react to that. And why that happens is what's in the book.
Yeah. So then let's dive into probably what's going to navigate the rest of the conversation when we're talking about which one am I? Am I a sword or am I a shield? Can you break down, please, for us these 2 concepts so that the listener or viewer can really kind of begin to understand and apply which one makes the most sense for them?
Sure.
Connell, how about sword and David shield?
Perfect.
There we go. Divide and conquer here. Or did I get it right?
You do me and I'll do you.
Okay, perfect. There we go. All right,
perfect.
Again, what David was saying is swords tend to be a little deficient on the stimulating side of their brain chemistry. And when you're deficient on that side, the way you attempt to gain homeostasis again, some sense of equilibrium, is to increase the level of central nervous system arousal.
Okay.
So it really has to do. I mean, if you look at arousal as a kind of vertical axis, there's some part of arousal that's too much, and some that's too little, and some kind of Goldilocks is absolutely just right. That's where we want to stay. Well, if you're deficient on the stimulating side of the brain chemistry, you're gonna want to bump that level of arousal up a little bit. And the way you do that is with behavior. So that people who are swords tend to be tolerant of taking risks because risks are stimulating. You know, I mean, the danger is stimulating. It kind of gets you going. They tend to be a little bit more impulsive, so they tend to have a more difficult time delaying gratification. They want what they want, and they want it now. They tend to process anger more externally. So those are some of the characteristics of the behavioral manifestations of having a little bit too little on the brain chemistry side of stimulation. So
Beautiful.
shields are really different animals.
Well, shields are the opposite. But before we get to the shields, we're all hybrids. But we all sort of tend to be more one than the other. So you pointed out that as you read through the book, you saw that you had some shield tendencies. So just take everything that Connell said about swords and flip it upside down. So shields are looking for less arousal. They're trying to calm themselves. They have great impulse control. They bury their feelings. You don't usually know if they're mad. They're not the guy that's going to drive down the street and pull a gun out and have road rage. They are well more focused. You give them a project, even if they don't like it, they're going to do it, and they're going to dissect it, and they're going to get it right. And they are not reward oriented. They are more negative outcome. That's their motivation. Someone,
You mean like avoiding a negative outcome.
yeah. So you're going to have diabetes if you don't stop eating these candy bars. So that's enough for them. And whereas a sword is going to eat the candy bar because it's got sugar in it, and sugar is going to release dopamine.
Yeah.
So all these behaviors really are opposite. And shields don't need immediate gratification. They can delay gratification. They're not risk takers. That's way too scary for them. So as you look at the different behaviors that we're describing, you sort of see where you are reflexively with the way you react to these changes in your environment.
I'm kind of laughing in my head and smiling out loud here, I guess, especially when it comes to nutrition. That's where I really felt more of I kind of have some more shield tendencies. So it kind of makes me think of, I believe I'm more of a sword, but I'm a very aware sword. I'm very aware of my natural tendencies, my innate tendencies, but also I'm curious about and want to learn the tendencies of the other side, the shield. You know, what maybe has the most to offer? You know, where am I in my personal life, in my biological life? Should I be leaning more into maybe trying to adopt some shield tendencies, or should I really try to let my sword tendency shine here? You know, what is I guess kind of more situational dependent, and hopefully trying to better understand and navigate that accordingly, especially being so, health and wellness oriented. But, you mentioned something that I wanted to get to in the book that I think is, we've already touched on a little bit, but if you could expand a little bit more on arousal. How brain activation or arousal unconsciously shapes whether we are focused more internally or externally. Connell, I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but if we could unpack a little bit of the different ways arousal might show up in our life, how it makes us maybe feel, where and how maybe we might be not fully recognizing this stimulation as maybe we think it's something else. And so hopefully we can understand that this is arousal, this is stimulation. What is my biology going to do next?
So this shows up in several behaviors. If playing a slot machine, every time you pull that handle, there's a little bit of arousal. There's
Could be.
And and that's how a sword would approach the machine. A shield would be thinking about how much they're going to lose. That why put my money into this? I'm going to lose this. So they're opposite. And we don't, to what you said, we don't really get to change our brain chemistry. What we get to do is adapt and understand why we have these reflexes, and then develop some behavioral changes around that. And the book goes into that.
It does, yeah.
And we have two ways to change our brain chemistry. One is to adapt to it behaviorally, and the other one is to use pharmacology and add in serotonin for the shields, add in dopamine for the swords. But Con and I, being doctors of different training, we always refer patients to each other. We've been friends for quite a while. And we were frustrated in that if I was having problems behaviorally with a patient, I would send them to Con. If he was having issues medically, they'd come to me. But we were still fighting.
We got the MD here and the PhD here for everybody.
So we were still fighting the same issues. You know, why can't you lose weight? Why can't you stop smoking? Why can't you? And this is really what the genesis of this, all the studying was about brain chemistry, is there's got to be something bigger than Connell and me that are missing this. What are we missing? And that's where all this research came in. And there's a tremendous amount of research that identifies this relationship between the SORD behaviors and dopamine deficiencies and the serotonins with those deficiencies and the Shields behavior. So,
are you familiar with Dr. Andrew Huberman? You've heard the name. Huge podcast now all around neuroscience, and
I've seen his
he's a professor
podcast
at Stanford. His podcast is called Huberman Lab. But one thing he has brought up many times that I love is this concept that, to some degree, we can't change our brain, but we can change our minds. We can't really change how the brain is going to operate, but we can take control of the ship, so to speak, through the mind, and then get the mind to get the body to do something differently, to stimulate more of a change in the brain. How would you navigate that concept of we can't change our brain, but we can change our mind? Would you agree, or how would you kind of unpack that?
Well, the concept of mind is a very abstract concept. It's kind of the
it's like two entities living inside one house.
Philosophers and neuroscientists have struggled with, what's the difference, for a long time. But the concept of override, which is what the book is titled, is really that. It's taking the kind of organic brain that we have. And let me open this up a little bit. There's a study that we mention in the book done by a psychologist named Jerome Kagan, which I think is really an interesting one. He took infants; these were all like around 4 or 5 months old, and put them in highly stimulating in environments, meaning bells, noises, puffs of air. Different visual stimuli, and about 20% just kind of sat there and took it in. About 20% went nuts. I mean, they cried, they screamed, they didn't like it. I mean, they were highly reactive, and about 60% were somewhere in the middle. That 20% on both sides probably are the most extreme sides of swords and shields. So, Chase, which was the highly reactive? What would you predict would be the kids who were highly reactive? What did they grow up to be, shields or swords?
Swords.
No. The highly reactive kids grew up to be
highly reactive, meaning as in it felt unpleasant about it. Okay, excuse me. Of course. So that would be more intrusive for them. That would be a shield. Yeah, excuse me.
Yeah. So the babies that
tolerant ones
just took it in,
swords.
they liked the stimulation.
Yeah.
So we either like it or we don't feel comfortable with it. And if you can like it, and then you can like it too much.
What does that look like?
Well, I'll tell you. Let's talk about sex for example, and sustaining a sexual relationship over a long period of time. How we learn is dopamine is intimately attached to how we learn. and in a very interesting way, because it all has to do with errors that we make, prediction errors. So we make a prediction when we do you pull that lever. That's a prediction. Maybe I'm going to get 4 cherries or whatever it is.
Talk about slot machine or sex here?
Well, I'm talking about. I don't know.
I could go either way.
A little bit of a slippage there. The prediction error, if our prediction is better than what we thought it was going to be, we get a dopamine hit. The dopamine, you get a little bit of a dopamine hit. If the prediction that you made is accurate, it's baseline, and if the prediction you made turns out to be less than, what you get is less than what you predicted, the dopamine dries up. So how would you think that would relate to sustaining a sexual relationship over the long haul?
What comes to mind for me is, actually, I'll even just say the example, in the book is kind of, I don't know if it was a study or with a patient, I can't remember, but basically you've got a sword and a shield out at a bar or a social interaction, and, one is going to see, someone of interest, same sex, opposite sex, whatever your interest is there, and one is going to wait for a cue, like a flirt or, locking eyes, and the other is just going to see what they like, see what they want, have that prediction of what could be, and they're just going to go for it. And so I would say here, when it comes to sexual relations, they're just going to be either go, 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 because odds are one of these has got to hit. It's got to be a cherry one time, right? Or, I'm going to do it, going to get hurt, and that's going to cause me to retreat until I can get full confidence from the other person that this is going to happen. Am I on par there? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of sustaining it over a long period of time.
Sustaining it.
Yeah. So people who, it's got to be better than you predicted to get that dopamine hit.
So then I would say in that case, probably swords struggle more with that long term.
I think they do. They're also more vulnerable to sexual addictions for that reason. They're very drawn to novelty.
Yeah, which addiction was a big part of that as well, in relation to swords.
And a big part of this research came from research with addictive behaviors. Why is it? I always wondered this. I trained at UCLA. We had no training in addiction. This was 100 years ago when I went to medical school.
Not quite.
But we practice in a community where we see plenty of addiction. I mean, every community does. But so one of the things that was really interesting to me was, why is it that people aren't addicted to everything? Why are they addicted to this or that?
Yeah.
And
if addiction is a constant, then why not everything?
So the drugs and substances choose us. We don't choose them. So getting back to the slot machine, you pull the lever, you've got that dopamine rush. That's a sword behavior. Swords are addicted to or attracted to, it's a better word, to stimulating things. So those can be anything from cocaine to methamphetamine to caffeine, sugar. These are all the sexual addictions because there's that constant variety. Gambling, all of these, speaking of this, those are all things that provide a little dopamine, whereas the serotonin deficient, the shields, they're drawn to things that are more calming and more so.
They're going to be more constant.
Opiate addictions, alcohol.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
You look at, and again, this is a general statement, but it is borne out certainly in my practice clinically. Alcoholics are more often shields, and alcohol being that calming.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a depressant for the nervous system, so it's that constant calm, numbing sensation, really.
So addiction being one of the several things we relate this concept to, it's really fascinating how that, and where that becomes important is how you treat people. So if somebody comes in and they're an alcoholic, you can, you can withdraw the alcohol. You can do the detoxification. A monkey can do that. That's not hard to do. The trick to keeping people from going backwards is to get them to understand that if you're a shield, these are the things that you can do behaviorally from those reflexes that will keep you comfortable. And back to comfort, in all these behaviors that we discuss, you have to let yourself be a little uncomfortable, because it's not comfortable for a shield to be in a social situation where, you know, they're interested in somebody, but they're gonna wait until they're approached. All of these things, again, get back to comfort and how we parent and how we are in a workplace, and why we don't exercise regularly, and why we have different eating issues. Both sides have problems with their eating, and the sword eats to stimulate. The shield eats to soothe their anxious feelings. So both sides can be fat and overweight, but for different reasons. And so there's one of the things about the book that we thought was important was that this is not a generic self-help book. So if someone's looking for a diet book that's going to, and you know this as well as anyone with your training, you can understand what foods are good and what behaviors around that are good, but unless you know who your audience is, you can't really finely tune that therapy.
So spot on. And it does take me back to being in clinic and working with patients for years, day in, day out. And then, you know, even online for a few years after that. The initial frustration point I had, and I know a lot of other coaches and trainers have had and will have, is you know this plan is going to work. You've got all the baseline information, you've got all the preliminary data and biomarkers, and you know, all right, here's your plan of action. Here's the nutritional advice. Here's maybe the actual diet meal plan. Here's the workouts. Here's the everything, right? Some people just take off with it. Others, it's like pulling teeth, or it works well and then they slip off and then they come back, and it's just frustrating because you know, all right, well, I've done the due diligence enough to like weed through my maybe ideal client or the type of people I want to work with or seem to be attracting. Why is this not working? And so for me, I caught on to that pretty quickly in my career. And what I began to do was just, I would get to that at the end. I would go weeks probably sometimes before ever getting into, okay, here is your workout plan. Here is your nutritional advice. We're going to just spend time really going through the behavior change aspect. You know, who are you? How do you feel? What do you present with when you show up to just making the decision for all the things we're talking about?
And what motivates you?
Exactly.
Are you motivated by a reward?
Yeah. Got to find that intrinsic motivation spot. Absolutely. Yeah. Which brings it back to what we're talking about here, which makes sense. You know, if the more we can understand the human experience ourselves at a biological level and neurological level, you know, we really got a much stronger starting point for whatever the thing is we're trying to change or even just to maintain, I think. Shifting gears a little bit, talking about this concept I wrote down of aging speed. So you measured aging speed throughout these studies. You know, is there one that is going to have a higher aging speed when it comes to being a sword or a shield? You know, I think we'll just say in the concept of, you know, resilient aging, longevity. If a person is like, I'm a sword, I'm a shield, can they maybe learn more about their aging potential here?
I think they both have different vulnerabilities to that. As David was saying, you know, some of the behaviors can be the same. You know, you can have two people who are equally vulnerable to metabolic disease. You know, they're 40 pounds overweight. They have high blood pressure. They have a variety of markers, but they get there for, you know, very different reasons. You know, so that their vulnerability toward longevity may be kind of the same, but the path toward that and the intervention toward changing that destination, is really very different. And
So it's not as cut and dry as like, I'm a sword, more of a dopamine seeker. I'm probably I'm gonna cut myself a little short maybe, whereas a shield might be more safe and protective and have a higher longevity probability.
Well, I think if you look at occupation, the astronauts are probably not shields.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Race car drivers are probably not shields.
Entrepreneurs.
Well, no.
What'd you say? What do you think?
Well, you look at
High risk.
High risk, but success. Warren Buffett is pretty successful. He's a notable shield. So you can be successful, and take measured risks. I think he's a smart risk taker.
I would agree. Yeah.
But in terms of longevity, the high risk occupations, adolescence is a high risk age range to go through.
It's a wonder any of us make that a lot.
In particular, guys, can really do stupid things.
Yeah.
So you probably have more vulnerability, among swords than you do shields for those reasons.
In a medical practice, to answer your question about longevity, I'm a big believer in preventative medicine. So I advocate for these newer tests and these biomarkers. And if you are
we'll get along really well then.
If you're a sword, this is all interesting. Generally, you're going to learn about yourself. It appeals to a certain narcissism that might be there, and that, and it's interesting.
I am obsessed about this stuff, and I think a lot of my audience is as well.
Well, and to a shield, I'm not having that test. They're going to find cancer. I'm not. So I see this on that level. So if longevity is based on early detection and staying ahead of the game, I think the swords have a better advantage here because they are more likely to take the bait and behave that way. Whereas, the other side, our shields tend to be, hold on a minute, pal.
So taking action, even in the sense of not maybe making the smartest decisions in life, but taking action and wanting to gather as much information. There is definitely, I can speak personally, that that dopamine hit of, I have a Whoop here on one wrist, a physical activity tracker. I got an Apple Watch. Use a smart mattress. I for years used to log all my food, and probably like 8-10 years.
You're missing
and I get all the
ring.
metabolic tests and genetic testing I can. Yeah, I want to know as much as possible to really know what I'm working with, for some good reasons as well. I've got diabetics in my family. My father passed away from a terminal illness, non-hereditary ALS, but even still. Yeah, thank you. That really rocked my world, and I went and got every neurological test, every test that I could get cleared for, just to kind of like, do I got it or I not, kind of thing. And that's why I'm such an advocate for everybody, no matter if you're a sword or a shield, if you're interested or hesitant, just getting basic annual labs and your annual physical, like you gotta know that. You gotta know that information.
Yeah, that was rough for you.
Yeah, it was, but it's honestly the whole reason why I'm here now.
So you look at this situation as a sword. I'm a sword, by the way, and you want to know what your risk factors are. You want to know, is this genetic? I mean, that's the number one question that we all ask when someone around us in our family dies, and the genetics to why we are a sword or a shield are clear. We develop these brain chemistry imbalances from above, from our family tree. And so getting back to a point you made earlier about can we really change who we are, it's pretty tough to change your genome.
Right.
But understanding that this does come from someplace that you can't control, and it's interesting where it comes from. It comes from your microbiome. You've probably studied this in your studies.
I've had a lot of great gut health experts on the show as well.
And there is a brain-gut connection. There's a direct connection between the brain and the gut. But all of these things are initially determined genetically.
What would you say then, that brings up an interesting point, let's say we do want to, we've gone through the quiz, we've done this assessment, we figured out, all right, this is who I am. I'm a sword, I'm a shield, whatever. Which method or which approach would you recommend for someone to kind of lean into first? I know this is going to be like a big blanket statement here, and going, all right, I want to maybe focus on an area of my body, area of my health, a particular system. I want to focus on my gut health. I want to focus on brain health. I want to focus on cardiovascular system, whatever that might be. Is there one system in the body, one targeted approach we can have to our health that might yield us quicker results or increase longevity, or just what would have the most, I would say, higher health ROI, dependent on if we're a sword or a shield? Is there one system maybe that we could navigate towards?
The gut is controlled by the serotonin system.
That's where the vast majority is created, right?
So peristalsis and the movement of the intestinal tract happens because of serotonin. People that are serotonin deficient have IBS, irritable bowel. And so you'll see a lot of constipation in that group. So maximizing your serotonin in your life will help that.
How can we do that?
Well, there are foods, there are supplements, there are medications that provide serotonin, and then there are those behaviors for the people that are serotonin deficient.
Like hugs, quality, meaningful time.
Yes, yeah. and to not react in such negative, cautious ways, but to teach people how to be a little more swordish.
Okay.
And in the cardiovascular system, that's primarily managed through your sympathetic nervous system, which is a dopamine system. And so, again, just take that conversation in reverse. If you're having trouble with your cardiovascular system and your heart rate's going too fast and all these different things, you need to pay attention to that. And how do I mitigate those chemicals?
Connell, what about psychologically, kind of going upstairs a little bit?
Well, listening to, what David was saying, I think that, well, let me, if you look at the, well, let me come back to this.
Okay. Yeah. It just kind of popped up. I wanted to run with it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I had a thought in my mind, and then I was listening to the David.
It was a great explanation.
It would have been great.
All good.
I had a very specific kind of thought that you made me think of. That I've
cardiovascular, dopamine, gut, peristalsis, pooping. Any of these words ring a bell?
Should one of us be pooping more if we're a sword or a shield? Yeah. I can tell you, as a sword, that area is definitely covered. That's for sure.
Yeah, no problems there.
Yeah.
I do think in terms of what you look for, I think you have to choose what feels most relevant to your life. For some people, some of the things that we see these manifestations are in relationships. Shopaholics. It has nothing to do with physical health necessarily, but it can ruin a life. It can ruin a marriage. So I think you have to pick what area you want to work on. If you're overweight and you're under-exercised, I think that's a good start. You said something earlier that I think relates to this, which is that it's in knowing yourself, the advantage of knowing whether you have shield-like tendencies or sword-like tendencies is that it gives you the chance to say, how do I leverage what I know to work on what I want to work on? And one of the things that we've tried to do in the book is to come up with alternate strategies so that it's not, if you want to lose weight, it's not just calorie restrictions and that kind of thing. There are specific strategies that are more effective for shields than there are for swords. And so it's in understanding kind of your most basic tendencies, which are habits.
Yes.
And habits,
Yes.
habits. The unconscious has been around for a million years in terms of kind of the evolving, humanoid-like brain from different, on up to Homo sapiens. But language is relatively recent. So we got along for a long time just with the unconscious, making sounds. So information, processing information is still relatively new. So habits are really enormously important, and the habits that we have are largely kind of fueled and determined by these slight brain chemistry imbalances, so that the habits, they're so kind of organic and natural feeling that we don't feel like we learned them somewhere. We just they're just who we are. So it's learning how, understanding who you are, accepting who you are, and kind of honoring and going with the strengths, and compensating and overriding the weaknesses. And what David said, that requires being uncomfortable.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
But Con made the point about knowing who you are. This is part of this is the core of the book. But it's also, and then you touched on relationships. If you know that you're a sword, but your significant other is a shield, you know that there are going to be things that they're doing that annoy you. And if you can understand it from this perspective, it's a lot less aggravating. And my wife is a shield, I'm the sword. We went 2 weeks ago to buy a car. And I'm walking out of there with a car. The idea is we're going to get a car.
Yeah.
She's walking in there thinking, well, there's some other car dealers. There's might be a different color. You don't want to, the price, you don't. So
Taking everything into consideration.
if we hadn't done this book, I might have punched her. But, knowing, well, I wouldn't, because she would have punched back harder. But knowing yourself and then extrapolating that to those important people in your life, whether you're working with these people or you're married to these people or your children or whatever it is, it's really important to be able to put a perspective on their brain chemistry.
It really does kind of bring the concept of know thyself into a whole new light. I think surface level, when we hear that, or we think I'm getting to know myself, or I'm figuring myself out, or I'm finally learning what I like, what I love, what makes me tick, who I am, there are the obvious surface level ways to acknowledge that, to analyze that, to kind of take inventory. But what I love about the conversation we're having here, and at the core of your work in Override, is like knowing thyself is a multi-layered, multifaceted experience. But the more that we can know thyself, we can know others in our proximity. That, in my experience, helps me be the best me that I can. Not in a, oh, this is who I am, I'm just going to run with it, but oh, this helps me make sense of things in my life, why maybe I do what I do when I do them. But then it helps me kind of get perspective of going, all right, outside looking in, what does Chase represent in the world? What does Chase present as in the world? And especially in my meaningful relationships, in my marriage, it kind of reminds me of the concept, years ago when my wife and I, before we got engaged, I think we both went through the 5 love languages. And that was a very similar game changer as well, of like, I'm not talking about my biology and neurochemistry here, but I'm talking about the biggest thing that I crave and want in the world, and I think we all do, and that's love. How do I want it? How do I give it? That not only helped that concept for me, but helped me understand from her perspective. And with that information, we are a sword packed with a shield, going out into the world. And I think we can be the best sword or shield we could ever be.
It's also interesting when there's two swords in a relationship or two shields in a relationship.
I would like to see that. Yeah, I can't. Well, I won't speak for her. She hasn't taken the quiz or gone through the work, but just I would kind of say my wife is definitely a shield. And even just saying, "Hey, baby, are you a sword or a shield?" Just those two words alone, I'm pretty sure she would say shield. So it does allow for a pretty unique dynamic as well. I want to shift into a section in your book called Brain Types. And how we can better understand ourselves and when we take ourselves into the workforce, adaptation to shifting workplace demands. How does this really represent in the workforce? I know we kind of touched briefly on, maybe an entrepreneur, like they're all swords kind of thing, but, with this information of this is who I am, this is how I operate biologically, how can I better apply it to what I'm doing professionally? Or maybe even the question is, am I in the right profession? Am I even doing the right job, the right type of work for who I am?
Well, I think it starts with what is work to begin with, and what how ambitious are you? What do you want to do with the gifts that you have? How do you recognize them? How you trust them? And I think that there's some significant differences there. It manifests in terms of how you manage people, and how you manage people in work is really critical. And you're either managing peers, just coworkers, or you're supervising someone, so you're managing people who report to you. Mm-hmm. Or you're managing up, you have to manage a boss who is obnoxious or overly demanding or whatever. Yeah. And these differences in terms of brain chemistry play out in all of those areas. And what I've found, in working with people in therapy, is a lot of what people are dealing with and they have trouble with are relationships. And to understand what you're like in that relationship, mm-hmm. how you read other people, and certainly how you read other people in terms of brain chemistry, can be really helpful to people in terms of knowing how to motivate them, how to create a sense of growing confidence. Just to give you an example, shields tend to be in that they're very reactive, overly reactive. They're very susceptible to feedback. So if you're supervising someone who is a shield, mm-hmm. Giving them a kind of rich feedback environment is motivating. It creates better morale. It can inspire confidence in them. You'll get the most mm-hmm. out of them. Whereas swords are less responsive to feedback. They're more responsive to set points. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. If you give them more structure, I want you to do A, B, and C, and it's you lay it out in a really structured way. That's feed forward. They're better able to do that. So in understanding your own brain chemistry and being able to kind of suss out brain chemistry in other people, and in reading the book, you see you say your wife is a shield. We can look at the people that we know around us and we go, oh, I know, that's what they're like.
Which is a powerful tool, right? The more we know about ourselves, like I was saying earlier, from the inside out, but also outside looking in, and the more we can attempt, we have to choose first to understand who this other person is we're interacting with. I mean, to your point, every interaction is a relationship, at work, a peer, a superior, a subordinate, the person making your coffee. It's like if you can have these tools in your toolbox to quickly, or maybe over a period of time, develop this, hypothesis of sword or shield, like you automatically, I think, are way better in tune with who they are and who you are in that relationship and how to better navigate it.
And in a work relationship,
Absolutely,
you
yeah.
need both. You need, again, from an evolutionary standpoint, we've evolved because there are two types, and there's got to be as close to equilibrium or homeostasis as you can get. So if you're the employer and you're a shield and you're managing someone that's under you that's a sword, or vice versa, you need both in order to. You can't just have one perspective and have people around you being okay with that, because they're going to be, half of those people aren't going to be on your team.
Yeah.
So it becomes very important that you know your audience.
Speaking of knowing my audience, at the core of the show, we're very interested in taking care of our physical self, physical activity, exercise, regular movement, and with that comes the downtime, the rest, the recovery, which everyone should be prioritizing as well. And you have a section in the book about moving and resting, gaining greater control in that area. How can we better navigate taking care of our physical bodies? Not maybe to the same level I asked you earlier about which system should we be focusing on in the body, but in movement and in rest, and in exercise, knowing which one we are, how much more informed can we be really to navigate training and downtime? What does this really mean for us in the physical self?
Well, this gets back to your question about longevity. So our lifestyle behaviors have to involve getting adequate sleep, have to involve being on a good diet, getting regular exercise. These are all basic things to feeling better and living longer. So to the degree that you're having trouble with your weight, let's just use that. We talked about this. If you're overweight and you're a shield, find some other ways, which we outline in the book, find some other ways to soothe your anxious feelings other than food. No, we all know the premise that we have to eat well, exercise, and sleep. So what is it that blocks us from doing those things, even though intellectually we get it? So my answer to your question would be understand who you are, understand some tools that will help you not react in the ways that keep you from reaching those goals.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, one of the things that David and I have long since discovered is that information is not enough.
Powerful point.
Information is easy to access, particularly today.
It's the doing.
The doing.
It's the doing
that
that
matters.
matters.
The doing that matters, and the doing is really what's our resistance to doing what we know we should be doing, and that's where changing habits come into play. How do you address those things that seem so powerful, unconscious? It's just habits literally burn fewer calories.
Truly, wow. Yeah, I've never thought about that. Yeah,
So
we're just in
it's the way
autopilot.
the brain.
Yeah.
I mean, habits were the brain's wired in a way to look for chains of behavior that create clumps that it can put into the unconscious, because things that we just do, we don't have to think about, we don't have to mull over. We just do them reflexively, are more efficient in terms of caloric input. Well, now calories are pretty plentiful. When our brain was being wired up, they weren't.
Right. Yeah.
So habits are even more important today, because we have to learn how to change them. And what we try to do is to create ways to take the leanings that these brain chemistry imbalances convey on us, and create strategies that are helpful. Whether it's sleeping better, or it's motivating exercise in a way that you'll actually sustain it. or eating in a more healthful way.
I personally think that sleep is the most important thing anyone should focus on. I'll just make that blanket statement. If I had to give, Chase, what is the number one health tip here? What would you give? It would be prioritize sleep, because I feel when we do that, the cascading benefits are almost immeasurable. At least for me, and there's a lot of new science and research coming out stating this, and a lot of work, and I know you all hit on this in the book as well. Would you agree with that?
I agree 100% with you, because think about not when you sleep and how beneficial it is. Think about when you don't sleep.
Right.
When you don't sleep, your body puts out cortisol the next day to keep you awake. You walk out of your cave in the morning and the T-Rex is coming at you for breakfast. You've got this cortisol bump and you get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Cortisol during the day agitates. Cortisol drives you to eating things that are carbohydrate-based, that are energy-based, calorie-based. I mean, think about when you're really tired.
Higher fat storage base as well.
Yeah. I mean, you'll eat any kind of cracker that's around the day after you haven't slept. Your body automatically is wanting to do that. So
your habits are going to be out of whack. You're not going to want to make the same probably choices, or the level to which your ability is there to make the right choice for what you want out of your life is just out the window, really.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think sleep is probably at the core of this.
As a sword or a shield, which one is getting better sleep? Or is that too hard to say?
Well, both have sleep disturbances.
Yeah.
The shield can't fall asleep because they're worrying about everything. The sword doesn't want to go to bed because they don't want to miss anything. So they've got that FOMO thing going.
Used to be true. Now I love sleep so much. I can't wait to get to sleep. Again, the awareness theory, and I think for a lot of listeners here, once you learn like this fun fact about your body, and there are a lot of fun facts about sleep, it's like, I can't wait to go to bed. But absolutely, it's, a lot of times I'm working right up to the cutoff, or, I have like a pretty in-depth personal sleep routine. So, not all the way working up to like 10 o'clock when I'm going to bed, but, right at that cutoff time for me in my day.
But that's what it requires. It requires a structure. And some people are better at structure than others. Everybody's on their electronics, which keeps you wired. And so you need some downtime. And you need to set your sleep time, and you need to turn off all the electronics. It's easier said than done.
Well, just in terms of brain health, I mean, if you don't get the proper amount of sleep, it's kind of a setup for. I mean, it's a risk factor for dementia.
All those toxins that build up during the day and the cell debris that builds up during the day, it's at nighttime that these get transported into the ventricles, which then get ultimately transported out of the system through the kidneys. If you're not sleeping well, you're not getting rid of this stuff. And that seems to be the science behind why poor sleeping relates to dementia, because these neurons, these glial cells, are getting glommed up.
Yeah, the lymphatic system is not able to do its job, and therefore you're not, to your point, washing out these things every night that you need to. That stuff builds up. What do we know about buildup, inflammation, chronic inflammation, Alzheimer's, dementia?
And your other organs have the same circadian demands.
Right, yeah.
So,
but the brain's so powerful, right? It's so unique. It takes up about 25% of our total daily caloric expenditure. Most of the time it's when we're asleep. This thing uses so much of our energy when we're, in theory, not doing anything. It needs that downtime. So this is another important concept here. To kind of get towards the end, I want to bring home another concept of, towards the end of the book here, navigating the tightrope of stress. We touched on it in the beginning. We step out into the world. The world is going to be stressful. Our lives are becoming even more stressful. Maybe we're one of those babies subjected to noise and stimuli, and we're going to respond, or we're going to freak out, or we're going to be somewhere in the middle. How can knowing which of these types we are help us better understand the stress in our life, better navigate the stress in our life, and hopefully diminish some of that stress in our life?
Okay. You know what makes me smile, because I think, you know, what is how you deal with stress is largely a matter of interpretation. There's good stress and there's healthy stress.
Excellent point. Excellent
and
point.
there's unhealthy stress. So we're really talking about unhealthy stress. I mean, that's the part that's hard on your body.
Like a sword might view this as not really that big of a stressor, whereas a shield might. We're looking at the same thing, right?
It can be the same behavior, or there can be certain situations may create stress in the body, but it's healthy stress, and that stress is usually short term. It's short lived. The brains are wired really well to deal with acute stress. We know how to deal with that. What the brain is not good at dealing with, in a constructive way, is chronic stress. And a lot of people experience chronic stress. The problem,
Like what? Sorry, can we get some examples there for chronic stress? How would you define that?
well, chronic stress would be anything that kind of sets the stress mechanism in motion, which is dumping cortisol into your system. The amygdala gets fired up.
Driving to work.
Yeah, I was gonna say real world examples like that.
Driving
just
home.
environmental stimuli, chronic stimuli.
Yeah, pollution is stressful on the body.
Having the
in a way that's invisible.
annoyances
stress.
at work.
Yeah, it's having a bad boss is stressful. Economic worries. I mean, people are. We're talking about are we going to have a recession? There are lots of layoffs that are going on. The Fed is raising interest rates. What's going to happen? Am I going to get laid off?
And all this is going to be interpreted so differently by which type we are, correct?
It's interpreted differently, by each one. But we all need to learn how to manage our stress in a healthier way.
There's a subtle difference in how we express this on the two sides of the brain chemistry equation. Stress creates anxiety. So anxiety is worry, whereas the shields are worriers. On the other side of the coin, the swords, their anxiety is more agitation. They're more physically engaged in that stress. And that's the external manifestation. So anxiety, worry, or agitation. Internally, all this stress is inflammatory to the system. So the inflammation to the system, getting back to the aging issue, is detrimental. It's subtle.
Yeah.
It's it's there, and we're really not aware of that. So managing your stress becomes very important. Again, we talk about this, but if you can exercise 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day, go for a walk. You don't have to be, Arnold Schwarzenegger. You can just walk for 30 minutes. You're going to get 18 hours worth of an endorphin, which is going to be calming. So there are a lot of things that you can do to manage the stress. That's a huge part of what this is and what we've talked about in Override.
It reminds me of this new stress management technique I'm trying actually with my dog. She doesn't go in the car a whole lot, except when if I have time, I'll walk her. It's a fair walk to the groomers like once a month. But now she knows every time she gets in the car, when I take her, she starts panicking, high anxiety, high stress, because she just doesn't enjoy it. So what I've been trying to do is just incorporate more car rides. And just not wind up at the groomers. And so it's that stress management system that it just makes me think how easily applicable that could be for us. We feel some kind of way about always going to this job or talking to this person or going to this place. It's the anticipation of we are here, it is there, and the inevitability of when I get there, I'm going to feel some kind of way, increased stress response. But if we can condition, get a little bit more exposure to that person, to that place, then it might not change it entirely, but hopefully it should lower that threshold a little bit and hopefully reduce that anxiety, because your brain now knows we've been here before. Not every memory we have with this person, place, or thing, not every experience is that negative anymore, which I believe, I think is kind of the underlying theme and argument. You see so much now, so popular with cold plunge and ice baths. It's this, it objectively has a ton of great health benefits, but at its core, it's very stressful. People freak their shit, and it's unpleasant, and you don't look forward to it. Yeah. But it's the after effect that we're after. So, this is what we're talking about here. Just really unique stress mitigation tools to get the mind and the body to really okay, we can handle this.
Well, and I think if you look at social anxiety, the stress there is to reduce the stress, which is you want to be able to have an experience that's a constructive experience, but you don't want to experience the anxiety that it takes putting yourself into that situation where it might have a bad outcome or a good outcome. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable, stressed, to get the reward. So part of the path to, I think, a healthful existence is in having the will and the courage to be uncomfortable where you know that it serves a purpose. And if you're willing to do that, then you get the benefit of having a less stressful existence. But sometimes you have to go through something that's a little bit more stressful to get there.
I agree wholeheartedly. And actually, I want to reference this book, and I'm so embarrassed that I can't remember the full title right now. I'm a huge Ryan Holiday fan. And he has this book in his kind of series. It's like Ego is the Enemy, Courage is Calling. There we go, excuse me. If anybody's looking for a great kind of extracurricular read, on top of Override, of course, is Courage is Calling by Ryan Holiday. It's an incredible example of what we're talking about here, I think, but less scientific. It's just more real world and real world examples of people that have pushed through that anticipation. Thought leaders, world leaders, presidents, historians, things like that. So Courage is Calling, everybody. I want to get to my last question before last question. Ultimately, the biggest question I had out of this book was, well, am I really in control of my life, of my body, I should say? Is there a level of knowing thyself and understanding how I operate, how I show up in the world, and understanding my biology and neurochemistry and all of this? To what level do we really have control over the self? Or is it just more of better understanding it so that we can live more in harmony with it and we have less resistance to how this meat suit kind of just naturally shows up in the world? Do we actually have dominion over ourselves?
I think we do. I think we have great a great ability to not only know ourselves, but then to apply that. If you're honest and you recognize those behaviors that are reflex.
If you're honest.
And you then extrapolate that into, where does that get me in trouble? Where does that cause problems in my life?
I like that.
And you then learn some tools to make that easier and not to face those problems as a reaction. Someone as a sword, I speak before I think. And sometimes that isn't good. My impulse, if I get angry, I'm angry. Certain situations, it would be better if I count to 10 and think about what I'm going to say. It's simple, but it makes a difference. And you get into less situations that are uncomfortable for you. So I think we have tremendous control over things. Not everything, thank God, because then it would be boring. But I think it's important knowing yourself, knowing what behaviors are reflex for you, and seeing which ones are problematic, and then developing a plan to mitigate them.
Well said. Well said. Connell?
Yeah, no, I think that's I think what David has said is really true. I mean, some things we don't have dominion over. Some, our DNA kind of speaks, certain kinds of things. We have experiences that we learn from different things. Just you were saying you had some real physical issues to deal with and struggle through. I mean, you wouldn't recommend that for anybody, but I'm sure you learned, and it changed your life. It shifted it.
That's why we're here today. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think the kind of dominion that we have, if you're open to it, if you are a seeker at all. I mean, I don't, may be kind of a woo-woo word, but that it's a lifelong process.
Truly,
you continue to learn, and as you go through stages of life, I'm a lot older than than you guys are. I'm not a lot older than David, but
Yes, you are.
All right. You deal with different things. Different things come up. Different challenges come up. Things that weren't challenging at one point become all of a sudden challenging.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
In my case, recently, painting a wall used to be easy. Now it
There you go.
breaks my back. Yeah. Well, so that brings me to my final question. Living a life ever forward is really a lot of this, and this is why I bring on guests and experts such as yourself to kind of help us bring awareness to key areas of our life, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being, to truly know thyself, but more than that, to know and then to take action and to move forward. So, Dr. David, let's go with you first. When you hear those words, ever forward, what does that mean to you? How do you say that you live a life ever forward?
It means, again, understanding how we relate to stress, how we relate to things that are uncomfortable, understanding why that happens, letting ourselves off the hook a little bit because it is a reflex, but having the responsibility to change those things so that we can minimize the stress, that we become proactive, we become empowered as opposed to victims.
I love that you use the word responsibility. Yeah, it's huge. Dr. Connell?
What occurs to me is looking for those things that are hard, are challenging.
Yes.
And not easy. And trying to recognize. I try and recognize ways that I try and cheat. And try and then kind of do something a little bit different.
Good on you.
So instead of doing the easy thing, the comfortable thing, I try and do whatever it is that I think is the constructive thing. And
hard right over the easy wrong here.
Yeah, and it's hard, and I'm not, I do it really imperfectly, but as a kind of your mantra is, ever forward. To me, if you look at critical path, I mean, the value of knowing how to get from here to there, when it has a critical path, is knowing when you've fallen off it, and not knowing you will fall off it, but when you have a critical path, you've got something to get back on.
Amazing answers. I really loved both of them and appreciated both of them. I always say there's never a right or a wrong answer to that. It's just your interpretation. And this is the part where I have just extreme gratitude for you all being with me here today and having the opportunity with the audience here watching and listening to keep probing and to keep on my own path and to share this path with others. So hopefully that it helps. I should say I am always looking to help people that are one step behind me or 1,000 steps behind me, because that's what I'm always constantly looking for in life as well. You all might be one step ahead of me or 1,000 steps ahead of me in one area of my life that I'm curious about or is adding immense value to my life, to my personal self, professional self, my wellness. And so we're all here to just serve each other on that path. So I say thank you again.
Thank you. And you're a much better painter than we are, for the record.
I have a great team. Shout out my wife, May, for being a pinch hitter there. I don't recommend it. I can, deadlift over 400 pounds, no problem. I pick up a paint roller to hit a wall and my back just takes total control.
Well, Chase, this has been really a very interesting conversation, and your openness, your background, your vulnerability has been really a pleasure to help us get into the book.
Thank you. I'm always trying to share as much as possible because I feel like that helps the dynamic of the conversation, the dynamic of this show. It's not just someone grabbing a microphone and talking to somebody about something. How relatable is it? And again, it brings me back to the greatest success I always felt with my coaching practice was the humanization component I had with my clients and my patients. The more that we could see each other first and foremost as humans who one of us is here and one of us is there, but both of us are in this human experience together. What information can we share with each other to support this journey we're on together? Start there, and then I can put on, the coach hat or the expert hat appropriately afterwards. So I received that. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.